Today we're going to take questions from people who are chatting in online, and I wanted to get started just by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your background. What were you doing before you applied to the Stanford MBA program, and what ultimately led you to pursue an MBA at Stanford?
Sure, I can start. My name is Sarah. I graduated in 2010, studied economics from Chicago originally. And before the GSB, I had tried two things. First, worked in the capital markets on the banking side at Morgan Stanley, and then moved over to consulting and was with BCG for 3 years. The reason I decided to apply to the business school, to business school in general, and also the GSB, was I really wanted to get into impact investing, and it was something that I didn't really see a path toward, and also wanted to explore before I really dedicated myself to it, and so have gotten to do so while here.
Awesome, thanks.
Great. And I worked for a few years in consulting, 2 years in consulting in Atlanta, and then worked for 4 years in social enterprise in sub-Saharan Africa, primarily within operations roles. What made me most interested about wanting to come back to GSB and MBA was I was interested in moving back to the States, and the MBA seemed like a very good way to move back stateside. And then I was interested in developing skills beyond kind of core operations and supply chain skills, specifically within leadership and general strategy.
Awesome. That's really interesting. So we've got a few questions that have been sent to us already via chat. Somebody is asking us, what are the most common careers that Stanford MBAs pursue after you graduate? And I know this is a really personal question, so maybe each of you can just talk about what were your career goals coming into Stanford, and what are you planning to do after you graduate, and what are some of the resources that you're using at Stanford to help you navigate that path?
So coming into Stanford, I was very interested in working within entrepreneurship and a startup, probably specifically within social enterprise space again. Over my time here, I pivoted a little bit more to being interested in healthcare. And upon graduation, I'll be working with a very large medical device company in emerging market strategy. So kind of combining two of those together. The resources I used were on-campus recruiting, which happens both in first year and second year. And I actually ended up taking a full-time offer with the firm I interned with this summer. But before doing that, before accepting that offer, I also considered consulting, also through on-campus recruiting, and then one or two other opportunities that came through with speaking with other alumni that were also working in the healthcare space.
Awesome.
And I mentioned that I was interested in testing my thesis on impact investing, and so to do that, the GSB has a resource called Impact Labs, the Impact Labs program, and so I got to apply and intern for an impact investment fund, which was exactly what I wanted to do, and got to work at a fund during the year, tested that out, and actually realized that I wanted to try more traditional early stage investing after that. Wasn't really sure how impact investing was defined, at least in my mind. So through a summer internship, tried traditional venture capital, really enjoyed that. We'll likely also be returning to my summer internship, and would say I think resources that were helpful along the way for me, also took advantage of our alum network in terms of just learning about what they do, helping recruiting, and then our career management office was really great too. Had a lot of one-on-one sessions with our career advisors, and they really helped me hone in on what I was interested in and what I wanted to do.
Amazing. That sounds great. We also have a question about global experiences. I just talked earlier about the requirement as well as the portfolio of opportunities that are available. Could each of you share kind of what your global experiences look like and what the experience was like for you?
Sure. So last year I went on 2 of the trips, the GSTs that we're talking about, the global study trips. My first one was in the winter to Thailand, and then my second was to South Africa. And I would say both of them were incredible. I hadn't been to either of those countries, and the trips really help you learn about the country. There's a big cultural component that goes into just learning about the food and some of the customs. You have to do meetings beforehand, which were really helpful in hitting the ground and knowing what to do and not feeling like a total outsider. And then I also just loved getting to know these very different economies and there's a sovereign nation in Thailand that we had to think about. Learning about agriculture there was really fascinating, and those are probably two of my favorite experiences at the GSB in the first year.
Wow.
And I did a trip over spring break to go to Brazil, and it was specifically a social innovation trip focused on health and education in Brazil. So likewise to Sarah, there was just so much that you could learn there. What I really liked about it was we met from everyone from the former president of Brazil during a financial crisis that was going on in the country, all the way through to a frontline clinic in the northeast of the country. So kind of getting and everything in between. So a wide breadth of experiences. The other thing I would add is it's such an amazing opportunity to really, or another amazing opportunity to really get to know your classmates well. And 20 people are on the trip, and you're spending 10 days with them and a lot of time in each of those days. And so it's another great opportunity to build relationships within the community here.
Great. So pivoting a little bit to the campus experience, did either of you have a significant other or has a significant other, and can you talk a little bit about the experience of coming to the GSB with a partner?
Sure. Yeah. So my experience might be a little bit different. My boyfriend is also a student in Nick in my class, also an MBA 2 currently, and so it's I think the first time that we were in school together, I think I would definitely say it's tough because as probably everyone's heard, it can get really busy, so it's important to set aside time with one another. But I think for us, we really viewed, and I think this is true for even couples where one person is a student, one person is not. It's really a mutual growing experience, and there's so many opportunities for your partner to be involved or not involved, depending on what kind of path you decide to carve. And it can be a huge learning experience for both of you, whether you're both students or not.
And so I don't have an SO while being here, but I will add there are a lot of other resources that are available. There's actually clubs for SOs, and you get integrated within the campus. So your SO actually gets a card to go to the gym and the sporting events that are here. And then even some of the most popular classes within the GSB, your SO can take within their own section. So for example, touchy-feely is a really well-known course here, and they have special sections for SOs. So I think there's a lot of effort to culturally integrate them into the community. So it's kind of one large class.
We also have a question about financial aid and is it offered to international students? So I can actually take that one because I don't think either of you are international students, but we do offer need-based financial aid for every single person who's admitted to our program, and we don't differentiate between international students or American students in terms of access to financial aid. But maybe each of you could speak a little bit about the cost-benefit thoughts that went through your mind when you were pursuing an MBA and ways that you've financed it or thought about investing in your education here at Stanford.
So I came from a background of having done 4 years of living and working in sub-Saharan Africa. So I was a recipient of some of the need-based financial aid, which very much made that a positive NPV calculation for me. It's amazing about how much recruiters start coming to you as a GSB student, all the way through on-campus recruiting to just random kind of cold emails that happen during your second year. So the bump in salary can be pretty significant, and more importantly, maybe the salary, but the actual opportunities that you can do while in some of these organizations makes it NPV positive. I mean, for me, within 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't receive a substantial fellowship, actually very low, and have been relying primarily on loans. And so I think the cost benefit for me is actually still, the benefit is harder to measure, at least in the near term. But for me, the GSB has opened up doors, as Nick mentioned, that I just would never have been able to walk through before coming, or even known that I wanted to. And I think before coming in, there was, honestly, a question in my mind of, this is expensive, consulting is also general, you can go to something else. And I think having this hindsight bias now, I'm really glad that I did make that trade-off. And I just want to say, too, if you're not a fellowship recipient, the school and also their private resources that are both are really good in helping you bridge that gap. And it's what I rely on for my education.
Great. So aside from great weather, someone is asking us, what are some of the benefits of our location, where we are, either geopolitically or in terms of the valley? Have you taken advantage of local resources that are around campus?
From a lifestyle perspective, I love hiking. And if you haven't had a chance to come to the Bay and figure out like what redwoods are, they're these massive trees. Some of the most beautiful hiking, I think, in the world, in terms of day hikes, are right around here. San Francisco is an amazing city. Just culturally, it's great. Silicon Valley. So I think the benefit of the school is we get a lot of entrepreneurs and venture capitalists that come in to speak and teach classes here. That you probably wouldn't get outside of the valley, just because of the resources that are here. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I would say Nick pretty much covered it. And just add that for a lot of industries like venture capital, which I'm interested in, also tech, but many more, healthcare, consumer, there are so many interesting, exciting companies within an hour drive of us. And so I think getting to visit them, whether that's through interviews or just learning, has been really exciting, and you're kind of in the middle of it. So I would say something less tangible is just the energy that you get from that. And I grew up in Chicago, went to school in Boston, lived in New York. I do think it's pretty unique to this area.
Skiing and surfing is also readily accessible if you're into those types of other things as well.
And on the same day, if you're really ambitious.
If you're on this, yeah, you can ski in the morning, surf in the afternoon.
Yep. So along the same lines, having access to all of these companies, do you have any concrete examples? You really wanted to explore impact investing, and we have a question about access to social entrepreneurship. And having been previously involved in kind of social impact related work, do you have any thoughts on resources for that in particular, either within the region or in the Stanford MBA program? Each one of you could touch briefly.
So I think, I briefly mentioned this before, but I think the both impact investing and then also just impact labs program is a program offered by the GSB where you're placed either with a nonprofit or an impact investment fund, and you get to intern for them for school credit. I would also say more generally, that social innovation is very, very well resourced at the GSB and at Stanford broadly. So there's a social innovation club, a student club, but there are also, resources at the center that you can take advantage of to test different hypotheses that you want to.
So just to add on that, the Center for Social Innovation actually has GSB staff on that. They have trips, so GST global study trips that will focus specifically on social innovation. I was on one in Brazil. And then there's another program called SEED, which has an acronym that I don't know what it stands for, but essentially is money that's set aside to invest with social entrepreneurs. And that materializes a few ways from a student experience. So one is a lot of times those social entrepreneurs from around the world will be here on campus, and you have access to them. And then secondly to that, there's a chance to take funding to work in social entrepreneurship as part of your internship experience. So if an organization kind of can qualify through Stanford to accept funding, it allows you to get closer to market rate as a student to work in social entrepreneurship over the summer. And then also they have a loan forgiveness program to certain students should you launch a career with a nonprofit and social entrepreneur afterwards. So I think there are lots of access and lots of resources, and I'd argue probably one of the core competencies of the school.
Great. Those are really helpful, concrete examples. So Tom has a question for you guys about aspects of your experience where you may have been challenged beyond what you expected at the GSB. And what is the most important piece of advice that you would give your first year self looking back now?
So
ahead.
so I think the first thing is be open and ready to change. One of the great parts of the curriculum here have to do a lot with interpersonal skills and leadership development. There are so many mental models, or there were so many mental models that I held coming into the GSB about what leadership is, how people react in different situations, and being in such a diverse environment and having a very open culture of feedback. And the way the curriculum is set up, you really get to challenge those mental models. And I think some of the most challenging parts were in a team situation or in some of these courses where you kind of really get down to having to be pretty vulnerable to get to a point to get change and become a much more effective leader. And so being open to that process is really, really important, and sometimes can take a few weeks to get comfortable in.
Yeah, I would say sort of along the same theme. Before the GSB, I wouldn't consider myself a leader. I was very good at getting the job that was asked of me done, and always at a junior level as an analyst or associate. And at the GSB, it's the first time I've ever in my life felt like I have the confidence to be a leader. And I think that's actually been associated with things that have been challenging at the GSB. So I'm one of the co-presidents of Women in Management this year, and I help lead a board of 10 people. We plan retreats for the full class, and just thinking about things like, how do you create a board culture? How do you motivate people who are volunteers and your friends, but need to get a lot of work done, among an already busy schedule? And I think those are real things that managers and leaders have to face. And I've never gotten the opportunity to do so, and have just learned so much from that experience. I think my advice to my first year self, or any first years, would be open, like Nick said, but also just take the chance and have confidence in yourself. And I think having confidence sometimes just comes from doing it anyway, even if you think you can't do it, and asking yourself, why not you? And I think the GSB has made me ask myself that over and over again, and I've just taken on way more than I would have thought I could have.
That's not only great advice for first year, but probably great advice for life. So I think I'll probably take that one with me as well. So you touched a little bit about the challenges of being a club leader, balancing that with a lot of other obligations at school. So we've got a question about a typical week. How are you balancing cut and dry classwork, leadership opportunities through clubs, other initiatives that you might be involved with? How does that break down, and how do you end up prioritizing your time?
Sure. So I guess I'll preface this with I was given the advice, and I haven't followed it as closely as I should have, but it's definitely good advice to ruthlessly prioritize, and do that by coming in and obviously being adaptive and flexible, but coming in with a clear list of what your priorities are, whether that's academics or social, job related, being pretty specific about them, just coming in, because I think a big struggle, at least for me at the GSB, is not letting the urgent get in the way of the important. So I would say the topic of time management has been tough for me, because there are so many interesting things to do here. In terms of a typical week, and this kind of ties back to my priorities, which I think number one were around meeting people. That's one of the big reasons I came here, just to get to experience the people here. And then I would say for me, and I might be in a minority here, but academics are really important to me, and I've loved the classes that I've been in and the professors that I've had. So I would say I spent a fair amount of time on academics. And then, I mentioned women in management and a few other extracurriculars that I'm in. I would say I pretty much spread my time among those three. And right now, for me at least, the extracurriculars are taking a bigger role in my life. I think for prioritization, I try to go back to my list that I created, and update every now and then to say, I said that this is more important to me. Let me not cancel on a meeting with a friend because of this particular thing, which I know is less important.
And yeah, I'm trying to think about also how that changed from my first year to my second year. So first year, I think academics probably require a little bit more work outside of the classroom than they do your second year. In your second year, you have all electives. So also, because you've chosen every single class you want to be in, working for them doesn't really feel like work. It's intellectually stimulating on all levels. And so I probably, I don't know, could give an hour breakdown, but there is a decent amount of time for class prep. Meeting other classmates and building relationships with classmates do take a significant amount of time, but I mean, that's something I love doing. I also need a lot of personal time for myself. So I block out at least an hour a day just to, that's on my calendar that no one else can schedule over. And so there's a great way to balance academics, recruiting. Recruiting takes up a lot of time, depending which cycle you go through. And then, just prioritize at what quarter which of those are most important for you to go through.
Have either of you thought about pursuing a joint or dual degree?
I have not.
Okay.
I thought about doing the Masters of Education,
Okay.
and I decided against it.
Yeah.
Only just because, I mean, and the reason I wanted to do it was so that I could get an extra quarter, so I could get 2 internships. And that really just kind of came back
Yeah.
to prioritizing, because I was
Yeah.
kind of thinking, did I want to do health or education?
Mhm.
And just did kind of a cost benefit analysis and decided against it.
Yeah.
But we have obviously lots of classmates that are doing JD MBAs, that are doing MD MBAs,
Mhm.
and they seem to really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
an important personal calculus to make. Just like everything else at the GSB, it's kind of a choose your own adventure, and you
Mhm.
always need to think through the trade offs of what do I
Mhm.
gain from this, and what are the advantages of doing it or not doing it. Did you dip your toes into the water of maybe taking classes at the ed school, or have either of you taken classes, what we call across the street, at any of the other grad schools at Stanford?
I have not yet. I'm hoping next quarter to take what's called biodesign, which I think is actually a med school class, but it's cross-functional between engineering, medicine, and business to launch a medical device product.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say I'm in the same camp. I've just found there to be so many interesting GSB classes. That being said, though, something that I came in really wanting to get a better grasp of is computer science. And obviously, Stanford is one of the best computer science programs in the world. And so for next quarter, I'm signed up for a computer science class. And I think something that I would also like to try is just more with the design school, which I think has that very unique type of thinking that we can all benefit from.
Great.
I'm also taking rock climbing next quarter. I forgot to throw that in there. So there are lots of PE classes that are available. Everything from hip hop to rock climbing to horseback riding to golf. Golf is a very, very popular across the street elective.
It is.
It's sunny all the time here.
Yeah, it's a beautiful driving range. So I've gotten a few questions for admission, so I'm just going to address those really quickly. One was for students who apply from college directly. So if you're currently a senior in college, you are more than welcome to apply. You go through the exact same application process, and we're looking for the same 3 criteria that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So we're not looking for anything different. If you're thinking about letters of recommendation, you might want to think about your summer internships. Faculty members tend not to be the best recommenders in our view. We're looking for people who really can highlight your professional competencies as well as your leadership. So if a professor was an advisor to you for a club, for example, or for your research, that would be really helpful. But if it was just a student-teacher relationship, typically that's where I see college seniors benefiting more from using your internship supervisors or other people that you've kind of been held accountable to. Once you get in, we typically ask you to defer your enrollment. So you actually go and get some work experience for a couple years and then matriculate into the GSB after those 2 years. In terms of making yourself competitive as an undergrad, the same advice actually goes to everybody, which is we are looking for people that demonstrate a lot of intellectual curiosity. So take tough classes, challenge yourself, perform well in them, get involved in activities in your community, and demonstrate your leadership potential. Those are things we're looking for across all of our candidates. Similarly, for joint and dual degree programs, we're not looking for any separate admissions criteria. We're looking for the same 3 things for our program. However, you will also have to meet the admissions requirements for those other programs. So whatever the requirements are, say for law school or medical school, those are not things that we would be looking for in our candidates, but they are things that you would obviously have to meet for those other programs. We also had a question about placing weight on every component of the application itself. For example, do we weigh the GPA versus tests versus recommendation letters differently? And I wish I could tell you that there was some secret formula for how to read an application and create a calculus for it. It would make my job way easier. But actually, it's an art and a science. So we don't have any sort of equation that we use. So by definition, there's no weight placed on any one component. We talked a little bit earlier about how we have a holistic application process. And what that means fundamentally is that we look at every single piece of your application. So every single thing counts. and everything is a part of our review process. We try to weave all three criteria of intellect, leadership, and personal qualities into our evaluation of you as a candidate. And we really pour a lot of time and energy and appreciation for how much you invest in your application by taking a holistic approach to it. So there's no one piece of your application that kind of makes or breaks it. Even if you're invited to interview, it's not like the interview tips you in or out. That goes back into your application, which is reevaluated as a whole. So every single piece matters, and not one piece matters more than the other. So we're coming up on the last 5 minutes, and we had a student ask a question that I think would be, or not a student, a participant ask a question that could be a good capstone for us, and that is kind of, have you had one monumental experience so far at the GSB? And I could phrase it another way, which would be, can you talk about your favorite memory so far? And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be academic, or if it is, that's great, but anything about your experience that you would say stands out as your favorite part so far?
Ooh, it's a tough question.
Should've been
I know,
on
and you
that
can
one.
only pick one.
Only one.
Yeah.
Actually, I have one. I have mine. I mentioned that I am co-leading Women in Management this year, and it's been a really challenging experience. Part of the reason that it was so challenging was planning our annual fall retreat. 160 women come together for a weekend, and really it's ours to plan. We have last year's curriculum, but we decided to go rogue this year and do it from scratch. And it was incredibly stressful, the months leading up to it. And I would say it was the most fulfilling moment for me at GSB, because of what happened that weekend, and also just I would say the discussions, but really the sense of community that came out of that. I think when you get to the GSB, especially your first year, it's just kind of crazy, in good ways, but also not so great ways. And the opportunity to provide a retreat where particularly first-year MBAs could hit the reset button and say, hey, let's breathe, let's pause, and let's remember why we came here, and also talk about what's holding us back from being our fullest selves, and really be authentic and honest. I got to facilitate those sessions for the first time, and just hearing those discussions come out of that made all of the effort really worth it. And I think just the community element to interclass, which I wanted more of last year, was really special for me.
I think there have been a lot of profound or impactful moments that have happened within a lot of the interpersonal dynamic classes and leadership classes that I've had, but those are going to take a while to set up. So I'd say probably one of the more like pinch myself moments was I was in a class with Dr. Condoleezza Rice, who was the former U.S. Secretary of State, and we had a case simulation that she was running about what to do from a business standpoint. In Eastern Europe, assuming this fictitious country invaded this, and you had resources in that country, and ended up getting into like a very, very small pseudo debate about like the tripwire theory of NATO, which was like crazy that, this is one of the architects for some of this, and an actual policymaker, and still very prominent on the world stage in that side. And I think that speaks to a little bit of the resources that you or the access you can get in this type of environment. That happened like the third week of class in my first year.
Wow, that's pretty memorable.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for taking the time. I know we've talked about priorities and how busy you guys all are on campus. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and really bringing the Stanford MBA experience alive to everybody who's been joining us. And to all of you who've been online with us, I really appreciate you spending your time with us as well to learn more about the Stanford MBA program.